Hy-Brasil is a mysterious island appearing on maps from 1325 to the 1800s. This map is from 1325. In Irish myth, it was said to be clouded in mist, except for one day every 7 years, when it became visible, but still could not be reached. Stories about the island have circulated throughout Europe for centuries, with tales that it was the promised land of saints or a paradise where advanced civilization lived. On most maps, the island was located roughly 321 kilometres, 200 miles, off the west coast of Ireland in the North Atlantic Ocean. In March 1992, I was working as a resource assistant for Surrey TVEI, Technical and Vocational Educational Initiative, a local authority educational advisory organisation. We had just purchased a Dartcom weather satellite system, and I had been involved in setting it up and running it. I noticed something unusual on the transmission sent on March the 4th. It was a white dot, relatively large, in part of the picture off southwest Ireland. I've not noticed anything similar on any other pictures sent by the satellite, Meteosat. The picture was taken in visible light, some of the transmissions were in infrared, at 4:30 in the afternoon. The software has facilities for enhancing the pictures in various ways. One is a zoom facility by which one can enlarge a chosen section of any picture. I found that for some reason the overlays representing the outlines of land masses did not appear in the normal sized picture, but they did on the zoomed version. I don't know why this is, but it was useful in this instance, for it showed the white dot was not a rogue dot coming from the overlay, and it also allowed easy recognition of the position of the object, if such it was, though not the height, of course. The fact that nothing of the kind was noticed on any other of the pictures seems to indicate that it was not likely to be anything like an aircraft or a ship, or a defect in the transmission. Also, although it was not very apparent in the reproduction here, when the original picture is magnified, the unidentified dot is much more solid white than the overlay dots, which seem rather diffused. It also seems rounder. Although I didn't know of the Hy-Brasil tradition at the time, I was just thinking it might be a UFO. The dot seems to have been in the approximate position of the Mystery Island on the 14th century map. The Rendlesham UFO incident had occurred several years before, but this strange message that Jim Penniston apparently received, mentioning Hy-Brasil, was not decoded till many years later. On watching a programme from the Ancient Aliens TV series recently, I was interested to see Giorgio Tsoukalos reporting on the experience of Jim Penniston, one of the witnesses to the famous Rendlesham Forest case. This involved a message, apparently in binary code, received by one of the witnesses, Sergeant Jim Penniston. This gave locations of some of the places on the Sedona-Pyramids Leys proposed by Gloria Hazel, and an origin of the visitors which may also have been on it. In 2010 it was revealed by Jim Penniston that he initiated a download of information when he touched the pictorial glyphs on the craft of unknown origin during his investigations in the early morning hours of December the 26th, 1980 in Rendlesham Forest. 26-year-old Sergeant James Penniston was part of the three-man USAF security police team called to investigate the landed craft of unknown origin in Rendlesham Forest. The men with Sergeant Penniston were A1C John Burrows and A1C Ed Cabansag. Only Penniston and Burrows went into the woods to investigate the landed craft. Cabansag stayed near the truck as a radio relay for the men. Cabansag watched the mysterious pulsating multicoloured lights in the forest, while his two team members headed out on foot. As Penniston and Burrows approached the unusual lights, they noticed abnormal sensations on their hair, skin and clothing. It seemed as though the air was electrically charged. Also, a time distortion occurred. According to the men, the time seemed as though it was slowed and very difficult to move. Another odd characteristic was everything was void of sound. Now visible, the craft was sitting silently at the bottom of a berm, on the pine forest floor. Penniston cautiously approached the non-aerodynamic, triangular, black, glassy craft. It was like nothing he had ever witnessed before or since. The craft had patterns of blue, yellow and red colours running through the surface as though part of the craft. It was very difficult to put into words what he was witnessing. Sergeant Penniston was versed in all types of aircraft. He was a United States Air Force trained aircraft observer and crash investigator. As part of his USAF advanced training, he studied both the NATO and Warsaw Pact inventories of aircraft. His up-close investigation of the craft included photographs, measurements and drawings, which he recorded into his USAF-issued notebook. He took special note of the strange pictorial-type markings on the side of the craft. These glyphs were logged by Sergeant Penniston. He also touched pictorial symbols etched into the glass-like surface of the 9-foot by 9-foot black triangular craft. When Sergeant Penniston put his hand on the etched symbols, which felt like sandpaper compared to the rest of the smooth moulded surface, everything became a brilliant bright white, much as the sighting of Gloria Hazel. He could neither see nor hear. He was alone in a brilliant bright white light. This occurred for an undetermined amount of time, and then his sight returned. He was standing next to the craft, facing the pictorial glyphs. The craft started to turn a vivid bright white colour, so bright in fact Sergeant Penniston thought it was going to explode. He took a defensive position nearby as the craft was engulfed in the light. The craft then lifted off, apparently 4 feet from the ground, manoeuvred between the trees, ascended to treetop level and disappeared in the blink of an eye. The glyphs on the landed object. The following day, after touching the main largest glyph, back in his room, Jim was seeing ones and zeros in his mind's eye. Troubled by the revolving flashing images of ones and zeros he received from touching the glyphs, he felt compelled to write them down in a notebook. Upon completing the transfer to notebook paper, the image in his mind disappeared. Jim put his notebook away with his belongings and didn't think much about it again until the year 2010. Then, during a casual conversation with a researcher, he mentioned the codes and displayed the notebook. The researcher immediately recognized the ones and zeros as binary code and set out to help Jim decipher it. And it was decoded by professional binary code expert Joe Luciano. There seem to be latitude and longitude references to significant places which some researchers have linked with Earth energy grids. The message reads: Exploration of Humanity 666-8100 52.0942-532 north 13.131269W. This is the reference for Hy-Brasil, the phantom island of Ireland. Continuous for planetary advance. Fourth coordinate continuot UQS CBPR before 16.763177 north 89.117768 west Caracol, Belize, Mayan ruins. 34.800272 north 111.843567 west Sedona, Arizona, regarded as energetic and spiritual, sometimes called the American Glastonbury. 29.977836 north 31.131649 east Great Pyramid in Giza, Egypt. 14.701 505S 75167 West, Nazca Lines in Peru, 36.256845 North, 117.100632 East, Taishan Q, China, known as China's holiest mountain, 37.110195 North, 25.372281 East, Potara at Temple of Apollo in Naxos, Greece. Eyes of Your Eyes, origin 52.0942532 North, 13.131269 West, Hy-Brasil. Origin year 8100. While I was doing the work on the Negginstones roundabout in 2002, I received the following email from Gloria Hazel of the Staines.5u.com site. I was just looking through your site again. It's funny, when I was a kid back in the 50s, I went to school in Chertsey, Stepgates, and Mum used to take me on her bike, and we used to go round the back of Chertsey Church, where the Abbey now stands, and across the golf course, where I saw UFO in 1986-7, back to Chertsey Lane, where we lived. She always told me about the history of the area, and I always felt something special there at the Abbey ground. I still do. I love it there. The same with the Lammas and St Mary's Church. I've often wandered around the churchyard there searching for something. Anyway, I always felt something about the Staines roundabout too, and in actual fact lived not far from there, Bowes Road, back in the early 80s, until I moved to America. While in America, I lived first in New Jersey on the East Coast, and then stumbling one day upon another ancient site in Minnesota while on a trip, moved there a few years later. Pipestone, Minnesota is a very sacred site to the Dakota people, and it's where their ceremonial peace pipes come from. The site is on a vortex, and I believe it too is on a ley line, the same one that comes from Sedona, Arizona. That is also a very special place. I often wondered if it was the same one that runs through here, as the feelings were always that of being home to me. It's interesting that the three places mentioned, Chertsey Abbey, the Negginstones roundabout and St Mary's Staines, are actually on the same ley. But not only this, when the two places in America, Pipestone, Minnesota and Sedona, Arizona, are aligned on a great circle, this also passes through the West London area here in Britain and the area of the pyramids in Egypt. At this scale, it's impossible to be precise as to whether, for example, it goes through Staines or Chertsey, or if it passes through the Great Pyramid. The band has, as Lionel Beer pointed out, a scale width of about 100 miles, but it's certainly interesting in the light of what Gloria says in her email, although it could not be the Chertsey St Mary's ley, as it's not at the right angle. There is a ley which could be this one, though. This comes through a church in Windsor, runs along a long stretch of coincident track by Queen Anne's Gate, and through a spot which I call a sanctuary because of its feeling, through both memorials at Runnymede, which we found powerful on our field trip, particularly the Kennedy one, through the Pettersfield prehistoric site, through Laleham Church, Shepperton Multi-Junction, through the Prospect Tower at Claremont Garden, and skirting an earthwork near Epsom. Gloria also writes of a UFO sighting at Mixnam's Lane, very close to the St Mary's Staines, Negginstones, Chertsey Abbey ley, which actually runs along the other side of the roundabout, through part of the entrance to Thorpe Park. She writes, "The UFO was back in 1984 or 86. I came back from a holiday both years from America and can't remember which one it was. And I'd gone out with a couple of friends for the evening. One of them lived on a houseboat on the river just beyond the golf course. We were driving back with her in two cars to make sure she got back okay, as it was dark, and we were behind her, and we drove around the road from Chertsey Staines Lane, through Mixnam's Lane towards the golf course. A dark little lane, It was not paved at the time. It may be now. I haven't been there for ages. Anyway, as we rounded a bend, I saw something above the trees. It was bright. I thought first it was a street lamp, then realised that there were none around there. So I said to my friend, "What do you think that is?" She said she didn't know. And we did the usual da-da-da-da-da theme as a joke. By now, we were closer to it, and almost at the car park, where my friend would leave the car at the edge of the course, before you get to the buildings of the clubhouse. At this point we saw that my friend had stopped her car and was running towards us. We stopped and jumped out too, to hear Jill say, "Did you see that thing?" She sounded scared. For some reason at this point I decided to go and see what it was, and started to run towards it. My friends later told me I was shouting, "We have to welcome them," but I don't remember that. I just wanted to see more. I always say at this point, they decided they didn't want to have a crazy woman running up to them, so they took off running. They were originally just at tree level, but went higher very quickly, and I guess they were about at helicopter height, and they were off towards the St Anne's Hill area. Quite quickly at first, they seemed to slow down, and we watched them for a while, just every so often putting a spotlight beam down close to the ground, as if they were looking for something. The ship was not cigar-shaped, not round, but somewhere in between. And the thing I remember most vividly is the light. It was more like a halogen light, but back then we hadn't heard of them. It was bright and white. It also very quiet, no sound at all. Then all of a sudden we couldn't see it anymore. I realised I was a nutcase running after it, but I did it on impulse. My friends were mad at me because they said I could have been taken away. Guess I could have, but didn't think of it at the time. What are we to make of all this? It seems to indicate that Hy-Brasil is a submersible extraterrestrial base which has been here for centuries, and that this has been imparted from several events in a rather convoluted timeline. Also, it seems to be important to realise that it's part of a grid alignment going through Sedona and the Great Pyramid. The number 666, the year of the founding of Chertsey Abbey, in the message could indicate that the Abbey is the significant point in the West London area, and Gloria's statement that it had the same feeling as Sedona to her supports this. Why these things have been revealed at this particular time we don't know, but the timings of the events would seem to be deliberate.